I live in AppSec FantasyLand. Actually, I live in Utah. I also work in Utah. I work at my house. So my house isn't really AppSec FantasyLand, but I work at GitHub, which many will get to why the background of the joke, kind of the running joke that GitHub is AppSec FantasyLand. In fact, Justin just walking in, if you turn and look at his shirt, we'll be previewing the Absolute AppSec, some stuff from that podcast that is where the running joke about it started. So perfect timing, Justin. Thank you. And I chatted briefly with James Wickett. Anybody know Wickett here? We talked a little bit, and he said, a lot of these talks we give, we're all giving like variations on the same talk. And so as I sat through Dan's and Tanya's and now Justin's talk, I thought, there's a lot of these same things we're starting to say here. So if you guys don't enjoy my talk, you've probably heard it somewhere else. So if you fall asleep because you just had lunch, it's all right. You probably heard it. No, I think there's some unique things, and my purpose here is not to promote GitHub, not to tell you to use us, although it's great if you do. But genuinely, I got to GitHub and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I'm amazed at what they're doing here AppSec-wise as a longtime developer. So let's just go ahead and transition to that. Who am I? Did development for 15-ish years, all the way back to the days of slinging Perl. Anyone ever write a CGI script? Yeah. Can you claim that? Yes. Did that. Have always been interested in security. In the year 2000, around 2000, I was a grad student. They brought me to work on a data warehouse, and they got me a login. I'm like, how does this authentication stuff work? I'm really curious about this. There was this new thing called cookies, by the way. They weren't using cookies. They were passing a hidden input from page to page to page to page. Valid username in the input, hidden input, you're logged in. That works. So I put my exploit on a floppy disk, the 3.5 inch. Walked it down to the project lead's office and said, you have a problem here. And he was, to my good fortune, he didn't expel me from the school, didn't call the FBI for hacking. He said, thank you. He said, you've just made a theoretical debate we've had real. You demonstrated a real problem. Now go work, you young grad student, go work with the 50-year-old IT guy to fix this problem whose thing you just broke. And then I said, I'm not qualified for that. And he said, well, the man with one eye is king in the land of the blind. So go help him. Anyway, so that was kind of the start of my interest in web application security. I saw how brittle it was. Not until 2016 did I start working full-time. I'll get to the LastCon connection in just a moment. And everyone's familiar with imposter syndrome, right? Feeling like you don't belong, everyone knows more than you. Well, I impostered my way into working in AppSec FantasyLand, i.e. GitHub. So there's hope for you if you feel you're struggling. Also, I don't have this on here, but I've worked on WebGoat from an OWASP perspective over years. I don't put it on here because I haven't done squat in like 2+ years. So I've done squat, but very little. So the LastCon connection, there were some good things. You may have seen this image circulating around, the bottom image here from Pete Cheslock. This was part of the keynote when I came to LastCon in 2015. That image has gotten a lot of mileage, and it's in some ways true about our life at GitHub, some ways not. So I thought it was worth including. Jack Daniel also gave a talk. I think it's a good reminder, something just good to remember. It's not germane to my talk today, but he talked about staying on the shoulders of giants. And I think it's always important, the work you do, you remember that there's someone came before you, laid some groundwork, and to be grateful for that. As far as the LastCon connection, anyone seen the job board, i.e. the whiteboard out here? So I took a picture of that, took it home, and the one booth that I didn't stop at, Aztec Consulting, they had written up on that board, I sent them an email, and that was my entree into application security full-time work, working with Aztec, good company. They're now part of Moss Adams, which is a larger consulting firm, like a smaller grade, like a smaller version of Ernst & Young sort of thing. So anyway, that's my LastCon connection, so I appreciate LastCon. I think it's a great conference, and I have an extra special connection there. So let's talk about why this AppSec FantasyLand here. Does anybody recognize? I know Justin recognizes these people. Anybody else recognize the people in the picture here? The guy on the left, probably more people know Jim Manico, Manicode Security, or Manicode, I think, just. And then Seth Law over here runs a podcast that a friend of mine, coworker, co-hosts with him called Absolute AppSec. And both of these clips are from it. So let's just listen to what they have to say. The first one with Seth here is, I haven't done this with Keynote. Is it? Nope. Got to go over there. So then this one, he's actually talking with my boss, Greg Osa, on this Absolute AppSec podcast.
AppSec Wonderland over at GitHub. I don't know if you've heard that before. Yeah. It makes sense, right? You know, and so like, Postman, Neil, we're talking about, right? That one's pretty interesting too. Maybe we'll leave that until next week because that is like the whole context and how the parsers work inside the browser is pretty interesting. Anyway, so that brings us to Greg, right? And, you know, like, and all credit to Greg, right? I give Ken and Jason and everybody and Neil, like everybody crap that they work in this like AppSec Wonderland over at GitHub. I don't know if you've heard that before.
Yeah, I've heard murmurs of that.
You've heard murmurs of that.
I don't know where.
It's strictly jealousy and envy. So just it's fine, right? Like most of the places I walk into, I'm like, oh, ProdSec, you get to analyze. Here's 3 people, and you get to analyze 400 applications every year, and they're all high priority, and basically you have no life. So anyway, yeah, I'll credit you building the organization out over there, but
So that's the one example of the AppSec Wonderland, and let's queue up Jim as well. Jim's a little more animated. If you've ever seen Jim present or speak or train, Jim's kind of on the animated side.
XSS is nasty complex. I was at Locomoco, and I met some of the GitHub guys there, and they had a very different perspective on it. They were like, yes, sorry, Jim, XSS is not our threat model anymore because we're so good at stopping it. We're worried about markup injection and other kinds of injection that CSP is not as effective as dealing with, but that's not fair. GitHub has an unfair widget in their team. They got a Neil Matatol, they got people who wrote CSP. But that's interesting. Just to your point, some companies, and I don't work for GitHub. This is at a public conference talking, so to speak.
I do.
Hello there. But it's like XSS is to you as a elitist GitHub technician. You're like, oh shit, XSS means nothing to me, but that's not fair because you don't live in the real world. You live in the world of GitHub magic dust.
GitHub magic dust. There it is.
I applaud you guys. You guys have got XSS down. If anyone pops you with XSS, give them some bounty money because that's hard to pull off right now.
And we certainly will give you bounty money if you find that, if you report it.
So you're jaded. Sorry, buddy. You're an XSS jaded. You're out, Ken. Ken, you're out.
Yeah. I'm not out. I'm in because I'll tell you because.
Okay. So there you go. I know Jim's a lot more fun to watch than me. By the way, GitHub Magic Dust for sale after the presentation. No. No. So yeah, we have Magic Dust, we're elitists, we're jaded, we live in the promised land. Promised land was actually a comment from the HackerOne rep we worked with them. They're like, yeah, you guys are like the promised land. And I'll talk about bug bounties later. Did anyone go to Justin's talk over here, by the way? Yeah, sorry, we still have an AppSec team. We haven't gotten rid of it yet. We have an AppSec team, we also have a ProdSec team. But credit where credit's due. I struggle with putting this presentation together. I don't want to sound elitist. I don't want to sound jaded. I just really want to share something I hope that will benefit someone else. I think it's really cool to see what's happened at GitHub from an application security perspective. And so top left is Greg Osa. I'm not going to go through everybody. He's my boss. You saw him briefly in that clip, and he runs the AppSec team. He, along with, let me see if my pointer works, Neil, that's Neil that was mentioned, Patrick Toomey, and Ben Tay is here. They're kind of the original AppSec team at GitHub and have done a lot of work along with other people that have come along over time. And now we've split off, so we have an AppSec team and we have a ProdSec team. Difference is AppSec, I'll say, assesses and educates, and ProdSec builds security features. So 2FA, WebAuthn, credential scanning. Anyone heard that we scan public repos for like AWS tokens left hanging out? Things like that. They build those sorts of features. So that's more or less the layout. But these are the people that really deserve credit over time and continuing to build great things at GitHub from an AppSec perspective. So if you really want to go get lunch, this is the list of things I think that make GitHub AppSec FantasyLand, except for the one weird trick that I'm going to wait until the end to tell you about. But it's actually kind of been mentioned in some other presentations, just not the exact same way I'm going to mention it. I feel like I'm cutting in and out on this. Do I need to hold it differently, or? Yeah, it's something when I turn my head. Yeah, that's going to be great for people listening on YouTube. Is that better? Yeah, there we go. All right. Although I'm messing up Mona Lisa here. Miss Mona Lisa the Octocat, by the way, that's her name, our mascot. So that's an overlay of what we're going to talk about. Here's another way to look at things. I'm going to talk about the things that makes GitHub AppSec Wonderland, but there's things that we still struggle with, and some of these things you might look here and say, yeah, we struggle with that too. And I'll tell you right now, I don't have specific slides on asset or domain inventory. I'm just going to tell you, that's a struggle everywhere. Oh, we're running something on that domain? Oh, that's still hanging out there? You know, that custom app somebody built for this specific event 3 years ago? Oh, that's still hanging out there? And it's connected to what? Yeah, we struggle with that too. So here's some other things we're gonna talk about. And yes, that is not a copy-paste error. Anyone run a bug bounty or been involved in a bug bounty program? So you maybe understand this? Okay. So number one reason, well, not the number one reason, but the first thing I'm going to talk about is top-down support. And Neil Matatal was supposed to give a presentation, and we talked about this. He wasn't able to give it, but one of the things we talked about was my threat model is not your threat model. The things I have to do don't necessarily apply to you. If you work in retail, you probably have to run ads. You have to worry about performance. If our page loads, if GitHub loads a second slower, are you running over to GitLab to use it? Probably not, right? And we don't have to, or Bitbucket. So we finally got Dave off Bitbucket. No, is he still in Bitbucket, Justin? I can't remember. Anyway. Anyway, the point is we're not running ads. Have anyone ever seen an ad on GitHub.com? No. If you have, then something happened. Please let us know. Because you shouldn't see that. And so that affects our threat model. We don't have to worry about that. And the fact that we have a content security policy in place that would essentially kill most ads helps us. So that keeps that at bay. We don't know how long that'll last, but we'll take it for now. Top-down support, another point on top-down support. This was posted when we had an application security position opening earlier in the year. Sorry, it's filled, in case you're job hunting. But feel free to talk to me if you want to network some for the future. But you know, the recognition that security and trust is paramount, and we need to do that. But whose company says that anyone know companies that publicly say security is important, but internally a little different? Anyone ever experienced that? No, yeah, probably most of us. From an internal meeting, Nat said, "I'm proud of the AppSec reviews we're doing." A CEO of a company mentioned an AppSec review. Where does that happen? AppSec FantasyLand, right? It happens in AppSec FantasyLand. And so we have a repo, and I'll talk more about this. Everything on GitHub is done in GitHub. We dog food to the nth degree. So you can come and create an issue for an AppSec review, and we will review your feature, your new app, your new service, whatever. And so we do that. We work right in GitHub, and we do AppSec reviews, and that's recognized from the top down. ProdSec, their ships are celebrated at Universe and Satellite. In case you don't know, Universe and Satellite are events that happen about every 6 months. Universe is coming up in November. Satellite will be in the spring. Satellite's usually in Europe. Universe is in San Francisco. It's a big event. GitHub announces great big features. It's like a conference. But our security features get celebrated right along with, hey, we're doing actions. Hey, we're doing these other things at GitHub. And so credential scanning, 2FA, WebAuthn, pwned passwords integration. Anybody know about the pwned passwords integration, what that is? Anybody know about pwned passwords? Troy Hunt, have I been pwned? Look it up. You can download the list of compromised passwords. See if you can use one of those compromised passwords on GitHub.
I had one of those passwords.
And it told you.
They said you can't use it anymore.
Yeah, and so initially,
Like, oh, no,
right.
that's okay. And it's like, no, you can't. It won't let me do it.
Yeah, I think they finally started enforcing. Originally, it was just, we're going to put this banner up and annoy you until you change it. Now I think they actually enforce it and force you to change it. We got a little bit of backlash about some of that. People were like, no, stop telling me. I don't. One funny story was someone was like, you're telling my coworkers that I have a weak password. Like, there's an easy solution for this. Yeah. So that was literally their complaint on Twitter. Okay, and then if you didn't see, this is actually Mike's presenting later today. We acquired Semel, which is a code analysis for security company, and we'll be integrating that as a GitHub offering. We haven't, from an internal perspective, we haven't been able to dog food it. I wish I could talk more about it. I wish I had been able to get my hands on it so far. But essentially, we are bringing the tools to do code analysis for security into as a GitHub offering. So pretty cool when you get that level of top-down support. This is all about top-down support. So what's the downside of that? Most of us, all of us in GitHub, AppSec, like, what did I miss? Who's going to get a bounty on this, right? What did I miss that's going to show up in the bounty program? Anybody do pen testing here? No? So anyone know who Ed Scotus is? I saw someone with a sand shirt. You should know who Ed Scotus is. Ed Scotus has a great, at least as I heard this attributed to him. He talked about you get a penetration test, and there's no findings. Are you secure, or do your pen testers suck? Maybe, right? But that's how we feel, right? I didn't find anything. Do I just suck? Right? I'm no good. I didn't find any problems in the code. And so we struggle with that, right? Imposter syndrome. I don't belong here. Just a side note, public service announcement. This is people who get imposter syndrome, other people who get it, and yeah, all of us get it. So it happens at GitHub too. We struggle with that. And it has happened where we've done reviews, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, where we miss something or we don't get to it, and it does show up in the bounty program. And it's not easy. It's a lot of stress because, well, this is important. We're supported to do this, right? So I didn't understand the 10x engineer thread that ran around on Twitter a while ago. Did anyone see that? Anyway, we're 2x engineers at GitHub, meaning if you do it 2 times, it's time to automate it. And so one of the things that makes GitHub AppSec FantasyLand is mature engineering. I spoke in a separate webinar about this. And my advice, if I come into a place to consult and say, what do you want to do to make your development lifecycle secure? First answer is mature your development lifecycle. Get away from works on my box, doesn't work on your box, right? Get your automation down, get your unit testing down, get your integration testing down, get your functional testing down. authorization tests, right? Auth-Z, automated tests, right? This was just another software engineer at GitHub. We didn't do this. We didn't work with this. It just showed up on an internal, we call it team. There's like an internal blog to GitHub. And this showed up one day. Someone's like, I improved writing authorization tests. You're welcome. And we're like, this is amazing. It's AppSec FantasyLand, right? So, but the struggle then is you get mature engineering, things happen faster, right? So we get mature engineering, we can reproduce problems, we have automated tests, we have confidence in our deploys, things really start to move fast. And so we struggle to keep up with it, right? And we don't always get apps or services or feature reviewed. And I want to chat more about that, Justin, the whole concept you had in your presentation about reviews and peer reviewing. But I would say the example I want to give is a peer review because ProdSec wrote a security feature. Anyone see that we shipped organizations can be SSH cert authorities, and you can require that for commits in your organization. Okay, so if you have an org on GitHub, you can become an SSH cert authority for your organization, and you can sign certificates and issue certificates for people in your organization, and they have to have your CA issued cert to commit code. I can issue them for 1 day, and then I issue you another one for 1 day. So I can, kind of like a Let's Encrypt model. So ProdSec engineer wrote that up. SSH is pretty solid. The components on that are pretty solid, right? So that went to the bottom of my review pile because I had other things to get done. And it stayed at the bottom of my review pile. And then they shipped it. And then a bounty submitter found an issue with the management interface. Pretty simple problem, but I didn't get to it because there was a lot to do, and I thought, ProdSec guy wrote that, we're good. That's solid, right? And so, we struggle with that, just the shipping security at scale and speed, and keeping up with that. And we're not officially a blocker in many cases. Like I said, this didn't get us an AppSec review before it shipped. And so sometimes that means we miss things. Other times it's perceived that we are a blocker and we're pressured into it because we do want to review things before they go out. And so that's a struggle like many places. Like Seth talked about in the clip, you've got 3 people, 400 apps. They're all high priority, right? So does anybody's company hire rock stars? Anybody work with a company that says we hire rock stars? You've seen that, right? We hire rock star developers or whatever. Well, this is a great thing at GitHub is we prefer janitors over rock stars. Janitors get their hands dirty, they clean up messes, they take on difficult tasks, they do the jobs people don't want to do. Anyone ever dealt with OAuth code from a review or a writing perspective? You're lucky. Okay, OAuth is a nasty, complex thing to code, to implement, to get right. And so, Liz, Feministy is her handle, I think pretty much everywhere she said, and that's also her avatar everywhere, the sloth in a cup. And she took that on. She just came in and said, this needs doing, I'm gonna do it. And so this makes, these issues get hung out, and what happens, anyone done consulting, like security consulting? You do the review, right, and there's a finding, and you come back for the next annual review, and the finding is still there, right? So this wasn't a finding, but it was an issue that was hanging out that needed addressing, and it got done, right? Because janitors are better than rock stars. Because rock stars trash your room, right, and throw a fit. The janitor comes in and cleans it up. We want janitors, not rock stars. And your wall was much better than mine, Justin. We don't lob things over the wall at GitHub, and I think this is very high on the list of why it's AppSec FantasyLand. There's no lobbing it over the wall. I got on a call yesterday with a developer. They want to do an integration with a partner on something. And we sat and worked out the problem together, right? We got on the call and he showed me what he was working on. And he showed me this error message and content security policy was blocking him, right? And I'm like, okay, well this is why, and let's talk about other options of how we can do this, or if there's a way to get, an exception in place for this. And I said, bar's pretty high for exceptions, but let's look at all the options. And so we don't lob things. We work in issues, we work in pull requests, we work in repos all together, dog fooding within GitHub. And so that makes it a great place to work with developers. Sounds fantastic, right? Dreamy, right? Anybody want to guess what the downside is?
You never get off.
Notification bankruptcy, right? So like when you work with all the devs, you work with all the devs, right? Anyone use mentions? I mean, we use mentions in GitHub, so we can @ GitHub/AppSec internally. That is us as a team, or you individually. I might get an @misfire and, hey, can you look at this? Hey, can you review this? Or I've got a question about this, and email, and then we get all the email about that from GitHub, and anyway. So yeah, notification bankruptcy. It can be overwhelming. So again, this was something that was mentioned in at least 2 talks, possibly 3 today. I've come across tuned and automated SAST, security, static analysis security testing. So if you've done application security for any time, or you've used SAST, you've probably seen the run the stock SAST product on some large code base, generate 1,000 pages of mostly false positives, right? Lots of noise, little use, okay? So it must be tuned, it must be automated. We run this, and these are automated. Actually, Sentinel, that's the user that does it. And Sentinel will drop a comment in the issue. And we'll say, hey, it looks like it's like Clippy, right? But tougher, right? Anybody remember Clippy? So Clippy, but much tougher, right? So it'll say, hey, it looks like you want to change the content security policy. It looks like you're trying to do this. And then we'll link them off to a guide if we have it about like what they might want to consider or how to do that securely, et cetera. One of the things we look for example, is in concerns about server-side request forgery, SSRF, we look for HTTP client connections outbound. And so we get a notification and it drops a comment about that. Do we get false positives? Yes. Are they easy for us to triage? Yes. Do we also get some true positives? Yes, and that's where the bang for buck really comes in. And so we run Brakeman on Ruby on Rails, opinionated framework. Brakeman works well for that. We have customized components of Brakeman. And then we do a lot of regexing, quite simply, right? We just say, if we see this in the code, we want to look at that for 2 seconds. And we can usually triage it, right? So automated and tuned. This happens basically on every PR, on every pull request that comes into you saw the reference, the monolith. Anybody want to guess what the monolith is? It's github.com. It's the main product, right? So it's the large code base that is the monolith. So this runs regularly on github.com code, but our struggle is, there's much shinier things than Ruby on Rails, right? So there's Golang. If you hadn't heard, we were acquired by Microsoft, so we might be using Azure some, maybe. AWS, we have GitHub Actions now, which is, hey, run your own code over here in this sandbox and hopefully we're safe, right? So there's all kinds of stuff we have to worry about that we still have to learn how to tune and automate and look at to alert us on. You'll notice no C# though, so. All right, so this is another thing I think that's great about GitHub, and I think Greg Osa, my boss, really does a great job with this. Security absolutism, right? I remember sitting in as a software engineer, my 15-ish years as a software engineer, anyone sat in a meeting and like, we have these 8 tasks, and this guy literally was like, H, 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 H for what? High priority. Everything was an H. By the time he was done, everything was an H. High priority. If everything's high priority, nothing's high priority. So we have to do that in security, right? You have to care about certain things. You know, and Dan Cornell, I think earlier today talked about this. He got a great perspective on it. The business's risk, right? We often worry about information security risk, but what about the business's risk, right? You have to think about the business risk. If we stop to fix absolutely every little potential security bug, we're going to slow down until we're out of existence, right? So what do we care about? We care about authorization issues. We care about cross-site scripting. We don't think it's just solved. We've just put a lot of work into it, and so we have a pretty good handle on it now. We really do care, right? We watch for it. And I've told my son this a few times recently. Anyone have children, teenage children especially? You end up in these all or nothing grudge matches, right? Where it's, I want this, no compromise. And I told my son, told him a number of times recently, if you go about all or nothing, you're going to end up with a lot of nothing, right? And so can't be security absolutists. Bounties, all right. So who are my bounty people in here? What's your favorite part of the bounty?
Setting an award or
Yeah, it's kind of nice, like say, hey, you found something good, here's some money. What's your least favorite part about the bounty? This is what I do, I outsource my presentations.
least favorite part, going back and forth with some of the researchers that aren't too friendly.
So the great thing about bounty, you'll notice I had, Wonderland bounties, struggle bounties, right? And so bounties are great. My first week at GitHub, 10,000 bounty, 20,000 bounty, I watched them happen because problems got solved, not publicly, right? We handled it early. That problem came up early, we dealt with it, we rewarded the bounty submitter, and we moved on, right? I awarded, about a month or two ago, I awarded $42,000 in bounties. Came in from over the weekend. Again, I'm not going to tell you what it was, I can't, but those problems were solved, and that's the great thing. I don't have to tell you about it. It's not on Krebs on security on the front page. And so that's the wonder of bounties. And you get talent that and I don't have to pay anyone until they find that, right? Once they find it, it's good, we pay them. I don't have to pay for the extra 40 hours they spent not finding something, but we pay them for what they found. And then we get to triage, and so that's great. So let me walk you quickly through just the anatomy of how a bounty works at GitHub, because I think this is useful. We chat op a lot. Anybody else do chat ops? Does anybody want to know what chat ops is? I'll pause for a second. Okay, great. Please stop me. I should have said this earlier. If I throw out some term and they're like, what? Please stop me. As you see, I have no problem interacting. Too much often. So I'm watching my clock here. Because, I got lunch still. So chat op is the concept of like, anyone use Slack? Do you use Slack? Okay. So you can wire up Slack essentially to listen for something and then send off a request elsewhere, and then it does work. That's the short way to put it, right? So essentially we give Slack a command. In this case, it'll be .bounty, and then I tell it triage it or give it an info response, which means, yeah, that's helpful, but no, we're not going to pay you. And then it closes. So if I do .bounty info, the submission ID, and then we have like canned messages. We can optionally send a canned message to them. And so what happens is we chat up, so a bounty comes in, let's say, and I look at it, and I take whatever time it takes me, sometimes short, sometimes long. There's the downside of some of the bounties. And I say, yes, this is real, this is valid, right? So we need to look into this, we need to create an issue. So I would .bounty, triage, the bounty ID, and then I'd pick the repo it's going to go into in GitHub. And it will create an issue in that repo in GitHub. And I'll go in and click the link into that issue from Slack. And then I will comment a little more usually. Like, I tested this. I think this is where the code is that's causing it. I might have already found the code. I might have tested another scenario on top of the one the bounty submitter gave me. And I'll add a little more commentary in the issue of what's going on. And then I will typically mention whatever team has responsibility. I'll find what team has responsibility for that area. I'll at them, and then that is my issue to work with them, right? So I work that issue to the end till it's fixed, and sometimes before it's fixed, but oftentimes after, then we'll pay the bounty submitter. And again, the bounty, that's .bounty payout, bounty issue ID, and the amount I'm going to send them, right? And yes, we whitelist the amounts we send them. So if you add an extra 0, because that is its own issue, right? So we chat up all of that, meaning basically we automate it so I can just do it right from Slack. I don't have to go into 20 different systems to do it. And that's that goes back to the mature engineering aspect, right? We all chat up at GitHub, like every team does. And so it's a culture of doing that. It's an automation. It helps vastly, because Tanya talked about toil, right? If you were in there, she talked about toil. Something else that makes GitHub AppSec FantasyLand is we do have some of the toil, but a lot of it has been handled that way. So we run that, we comment. The absolute Fantasyland story in this was I got a submission. It was cross-site scripting, but it was low risk because it wouldn't affect GitHub.com. It didn't have your GitHub session. It wouldn't have been related to your GitHub session in any way. I created the issue. I mentioned the responsible team, and I think I mentioned a specific developer who had worked on a similar issue. She came in, she fixed it, we verified it, we deployed it in 3 hours. So that's the absolute, Wonderland story for that. And that was an amazing experience. The downside, though, we have someone who's written blogs complaining because we didn't accept their submission. They also deleted their blog in like 2 hours after they posted it, but kind of weird. But yeah, we have that back and forth because inherently there is competing interest in your bounty program. The submitter wants that security absolutism. They want the low risk issues to be seen as higher risk so they can get paid out and so they can get their reputation, because reputation is also a currency on bounty programs, and understand that if you're looking into one. They want their signal. There's two things, reputation and signal. And some people are very particular about their reputation and signal on those programs. So that's the downside of the bounties, right? And I should have clicked forward to this at that point, right? So, bounty please, right? Anyone seen the clip where she's like, money please? So anyway, so that is that's the upside and downside of bounty programs in terms of AppSec Wonderland. So what are we doing to make it more wonderful? I'm going to hit on a couple things that still at the end that I think make it wonderful, that one weird trick included. But the automation and the chat opping that I've talked about, right? So I'm going to walk over here. So when I create a bounty issue, it puts a label on that issue that it was bounty. It also puts an issue on it that it was security. I can run a separate command that says .vuln or .bounty. I think we alias it both ways. And it says, I put in the GitHub issue and then I put in the severity. High on this one. So it puts in a security high label, right? And on top of that, and I think this has won us so much here since we started doing this just in the last several months. We say high severity, target time to fix. This is not contractual. No one from the top down said, hey, when security tells you it's high, this is how you have to fix it. We're just saying this is when we think it should be fixed. And we find that developers go, you're right, we should get to that. We should fix that. And then there's a little note about what are examples of high severity issues. So Sentinel, see, Sentinel drops this issue in for us and comments on it, and that helps a lot. So just for the record, our issues are, or our severities are essentially low, medium, high. Critical times are hours, 1 day, 1 week, and then negotiable, but we don't want to let it go past 2 months, and we'll set a reminder to follow up on it. So for low issues, we don't really bother with informational issues. We might, I think it's officially a level, but we rarely, they're hardly worth an issue. Bounties again, we are cultivating relationships with top security researchers. This is from the HackerOne H1702 event. It's co-located to DEF CON. HackerOne puts on a live hacking event. Verizon, GitHub, other companies participate in it, where they actually bring the hackers in live, and they bring them in live, and we get to work with them hands-on. I haven't participated in one yet, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's like a long, long day, because the stereotypical hacker works until like 2 or 3 in the morning, right? Yeah, that actually happens here. I don't think it's just because of stereotypes, it's just because it's a compressed time schedule to do this. But the other aspect to bounties, and if you decide to go on a bounty program and you don't learn from your bounty submitters, you're missing out. That example of the SSH Cert Authority review where I didn't get to it in time and someone submitted a bounty, even though I hadn't got to it, I said, well, we reverse engineered and said, how did this person find this so fast? And we thought, they probably have this thing on their checklist. And so we added that thing to our checklist and said, when you're reviewing, make sure you double check that. Simple check. It was SAML related, I'll tell you that much. And so we said, hey, if something's SAML protected, make sure you do this check. All right. So if you run a bounty program and you're not learning from your top submitters, you're missing out on something. Take the opportunity, whether or not you missed it or however the submission got there, take the opportunity to think, how did the bounty submitter find that? How can I add that into my own repertoire of checks to do? Okay, so I think we're getting pretty close. Paved paths, and I think Justin mentioned this in a better way in his presentation, that is APIs that are secure by default, example code that's secure by default. We had a conversation, we had a series, a few weeks where we did chats with other AppSec teams from a number of companies, but one of those was Netflix. And Netflix is very interesting. When they look at the security of an application to measure it, they look at the percentage of paved pathness. That's their primary thing that they look at. Are you using the paved paths that have been put out there? And I'm like, that's wonderful. So that's something we're working on. When I say we're working on it, it means literally we're not there yet. It's something we're working on. And this is a continual thing, right? Obligatory, all the things, right? Automate and chat ops, all the things, right? All the things that are repeatable, mundane, that you don't want to do manually multiple times. And so one of those things is the over notification that I mentioned earlier. That's one of the things that I'm eventually going to get to, is a better job of automating awareness, essentially, what we should be looking at and what we can kind of ignore. What's been sitting for a long time, what just happened, so we can be involved in those things. All right. No, only 2 slides, so I think I'm doing pretty good. There might be hope for lunch yet. Is there any questions up to this point, by the way? I meant to stop earlier. Any questions or comments?
Come on, this is the best part.
No, I'm not done. I'm just pausing quickly before I get through my last 2 slides. Are there any questions or comments thus far? Okay. I do actually have, at the end, after the next 2 slides, you have a good question. I think I have two GitHub wireless chargers, phone chargers. I just ended up with 2 extras, so from a company thing. So if you'd like one, ask me a good question or make a comment at the end. Just flatter me, really. That's all I ask. No. Don't, please.
I think you're the most greatest, wonderful person in the world.
Yep, he just lost. So, Thank you, but you didn't. That's not going to qualify for no. So it all comes back to good people. If you ever interview at a place and you ask why should I work here or what makes this company great, and they don't say something about the team or the people, they really should, right? And so that's one of the things that make GitHub AppSec FantasyLand. I mentioned this earlier. These are great people that I work with, talented, smart, humble. Like I said, I don't want to say that we're not elitists, right? There's been some hard work that's gone in, and there's some good outcomes, but good people make all the difference. So the one weird trick, the one thing I think, that number one thing I think that makes GitHub AppSec FantasyLand, you probably weren't guessing it. Maybe you were. Empathy. This is a formally written down part of your orientation core value at GitHub. So when they talk about core values at GitHub, empathy is one of those. Others include things like product improvement, quality, shipping, collaboration, right? Things, yeah, we want to do good work. We want quality, those sorts of things. But this is the first company I've worked at where they said empathy is a core value. And why does that make a difference in AppSec, right? Because it helps us build trust with the developers. No one's ever worked in a place where the developers avoid security, right? The developers avoid security? Right, and it does. So empathy helps us build trust with the developers. We're not scared. They're not scared of us. When I sat down, when I had the video chat yesterday with the developer, he said, no, my interactions with security have been generally positive. So he had no reason to avoid me. I had another one where when we came on, they're kind of like, what? I didn't know what, that wasn't bad. They're like, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, right? So obviously this person has had bad experiences with security. And, but we were able to, so if we can build that trust internally, empathy is a key way for us to do that. We build that trust internally, the developers won't avoid us. And in the end, we all want really to build trustable software, right? And so this enables that. If we have empathy and we work with the developers, some have seen the meme, developers are friend, not food, with the Finding Nemo shark, right? And that's it. Developers are your friend. I was a developer, so I have a great deal of empathy. I know what they do day to day. And so I think this is the number one thing. And this actually was this morning. This was the developer I spoke with yesterday. Because his problem was content security policy. And we could have just told him what? No, you can't make an exception to content security policy. But Oreo Shake, Neil Matt et al. Has done work such that we have a way to do it safely and scope it properly. And so we've supported them doing that. And so because we have empathy, we're able to make that win. And so if we do that, I believe that is the number one thing that makes GitHub AppSec FantasyLand. And thank you.